Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning, and also to all these students who have come in such a wonderful amount. Welcome to this first ever UN World Class in The Hague, the International City of Peace and Justice, and second home to the United Nations. Today's World Class will do justice to his name, as our speaker of today is a world citizen of exceptional genius, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. A special welcome to you, Mr. Secretary General, and a warm welcome to your wife, who's come with you, Mrs. Ban Soon-tak. It's an honor for us to have you here, and it's wonderful that you're willing to meet these international students and that you're willing to take their questions. But first I would like to give the floor to our host of today, the Mayor of The Hague, a man who has worked in the center of international politics when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs. He's now combining his present and past position in an interesting way, I think, because he's leading a coalition, an international coalition of mayors, to form the Global Parliament of Mayors. Jozias van Aartsen.
Mr. Secretary General, Madam Ban, Mr. Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, a warm welcome to this UN World Class meeting, a very special one this time, because the main speaker is none other than the Secretary General of the United Nations, Dr. Ban Ki-moon. And I would therefore like to extend my warm welcome to you, Mr. Secretary General, to our UN city, International City of Peace and Justice. And thank you that you had time in your difficult schedule these days to speak to the students of our city here today. As you know, the history of The Hague as an international city of peace and justice goes back a long way. The first and second peace conferences and the building of the Peace Palace were important first steps along this road. And in those days, it was only states that conducted the music of the world concert. As you, Mr. Secretary General, are very much aware of, this was made clear to a very small Korean delegation which came to The Hague as individuals in 1907 during the Second World Peace Conference, to draw attention to the looming annexation of Korea. At that time, Korea was already a protectorate of Japan and no longer permitted to maintain its own diplomatic ties. The delegation was therefore not granted admittance to the conference and tried unsuccessfully to exercise influence through, the informal channels of those days. One of its members, the jurist Yi-yoon, died unexpectedly during his stay in The Hague and has been revered in your country and otherwise as a hero since. The idea that the international community consists only of sovereign states has prevailed for a very long time. And it's interesting to note that the father of the idea of the international community, the Societas Humana, the Dutchman Hugo Grotius, defined the concept much more broadly than it was later used from the 18th century onward. According to him, the international community was by no means comprised of states only, but also encompassed individuals, companies, groups which we today would describe as non-state actors. In our globalizing world, various of these parties, NGOs, business community, the corporations, cities even, operate alongside states and especially alongside the United Nations. And they can have considerable influence. To take, the best example, close to our home here in The Hague, the International Criminal Court, whose new headquarters will be opening in a few hours in your presence, Mr. Secretary General. Peace, justice, strong institutions, one of the global goals of the United Nations, is on The Hague's agenda every day. And it's really, really great to have you amongst us here, and especially amongst a younger, and all to say the next generation of international thinking people. And we need a lot of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jozias van Aartsen. Our present Minister of Foreign Affairs, he knows all the ins and outs of the United Nations. He knows about the heat of the kitchen of a UN operation, as he was the Secretary General's special representative and head of the UN stabilization mission in Mali. Mr. Bert Koenders.
Mr. Secretary General, Madam Ban Soon-tak, what a great pleasure, what an honor to have you here with us here this morning. It's great that you are here. Thanks also to the mayor of the City of International Peace and Justice. And it's wonderful that you invited me also here this morning. I'm really honored to speaking here today to this unique group of world-class students and in this unique building. The building, Mr. Secretary General, is called Diligentia. This Latin word expresses, I think, many qualities. It means more than the English word diligence, or the standard Dutch translation, toewijding. Diligentia has also connotations of carefulness, consciousness, persistence, and frugality. And it's hard to think of a more fitting Latin word to describe the character of today's main guest, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations. It was my great pleasure to serve as his special representative in Côte d'Ivoire and Mali. And I had actually the pleasure to just come back from those two countries yesterday. And I see what a difference peacekeeping missions can do in the world of conflict. I can only wish the students in this room a future boss with a mindset and personality as admirable as his. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, friends, students, your presence here today shows that you are interested in global issues. That's good. And in the role that the United Nations plays in them. There's a lot of talk nowadays about future challenges and opportunities for the United Nations. In my view, we must involve all of you, younger generations, because the world is shifting and changing very quickly. You may welcome that message, but please don't take it lightly. It means that you also have a responsibility to actively engage in today's very complex world and help find common answers to our common challenges. I invite you today to learn from the experience of the Secretary General. For over 9 years, he has led the main international organization, of which nearly every country of the world is a member. But instead of listening to him passively, please take an active stance. We need it. To paraphrase John F. Kennedy, ask not what the United Nations can do for you, ask what you can do for the United Nations. Last year, United Nations members adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a major achievement. But this was only the first step. The real challenge is for all countries, including this one, the Netherlands, to implement them. And that's something the United Nations and governments cannot do alone. We need you. We need young, passionate individuals like you as agents of change. Consider, for example, the work of the Dutch youth representatives to the United Nations. They spread the message of the SDGs in guest lectures at secondary schools and universities, inspiring a new generation and young people to become actively involved in discussing and implementing them, which is not an easy job. Another example is the Sustainable Young 100. This is a list of the 100 most inspiring frontrunners among young entrepreneurs, professionals and students with the most positive impact in the Netherlands. The SDGs, of course, are just one, although very important example of the ambitious initiatives the United Nations has taken under the leadership of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. I'd also like to highlight the UN's efforts to address climate change. And yes, we had a success. You had a success. We all had a success of diplomacy in the world in December. Reform UN peacekeeping missions, which is the heart of the mandate and also the innovations of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And from my own experience, I know how important these missions can be, but also how they have to be modernized, how we need a new generation of thinkers to make sure how we can function better in all those conflicts in the world that we see around us. I think your leadership, and this is very important, strengthen human rights through the United Nations Rights Upfront initiative and prevent violence extremism. The Netherlands is a staunch supporter of these United Nations initiatives and a loyal partner when it comes to advancing peace, justice and development. But governments and international organizations should not even try to implement these ideals on their own, because then we stay far away, cosmopolitan, sometimes bureaucratic. No, we need the engagement of all of us, all of you. Pursuing them is also in the interests of businesses, of entrepreneurs, of innovators, NGOs, the universities, and many other players. And we need their ideas, their reach and their power to make things happen. Real progress must come from you. That's why it's so important to hold these meetings, where young people get the chance to discuss with their leaders. I commend the Secretary General for sparing some of his valuable time today to speak to the United Nations world-class students, to you. Today he's sharing his wisdom and knowledge with a classroom full of potential leaders. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in the nearly 10 years that the Secretary General presided the United Nations, the world faced major challenges. It was a decade marked by economic crisis and by terrorist attacks. A decade also in which climate change finally made it to the top of the international agenda. And that is also thanks to, as the Minister just said, persistent diplomacy by the Secretary General. And I'm sure it is this generation that is very grateful for that. But also in a rapidly changing world, the UN itself is challenged as well, because an institution operating worldwide on an immense and vast range of issues is not very agile. How to prepare the UN for the 21st century, the UN that was depicted as a loving insider, as a beautiful Remington typewriter in an iPhone century. We're very happy to welcome here today the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Honorable Mr. Jozias van Aartsen, Mayor of The Hague, Your Excellency Mr. Bart Koenders, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, Ms. Marcia Luyten, distinguished guests, dear students, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me today to this very memorable and meaningful occasion. Play here to Jane. Hello, I know that many people are also listening my speech through webcast, and I'd like to send my greetings. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Dank u. Goed morgen. I'm honored to be invited to address this unique initiative launched by Honorable Mayor van Aartsen, and I thank you for your initiative. And I have come to The Hague to celebrate the 70th anniversary of ICJ, International Court of Justice, and to mark the opening of the permanent premises of the International Criminal Court. The Netherlands is rightly proud to host these important institutions. That is why we call The Hague and Netherlands as the legal city of the world, or legal capital of the world for international justice and peace. So there may be many good names for The Hague. They reflect the country's long-standing commitment to freedom and human rights. The Netherlands is a beacon for inclusiveness, diversity, international cooperation, and civil liberties. As I'm not here to talk about Korea, I'm here to talk about the world and United Nations, how United Nations can work together with the Dutch government and people for international peace and security. Since Mayor has just briefly introduced the relationship between Korea and The Hague, I just tried to add to my own reflection. When Korea was colonized by a certain power, at that time the last emperor of Korean dynasty sent the special secret emissary envoy to International Peace Conference, which was being held in The Hague. Of course, at that time, nobody knew Korea. And this special envoy, Patriot Lee, was not able to get an access to the conference itself. He was so much frustrated. He felt very much sense of disloyalty, so that in a sense that he could not carry out his duties given by the emperor. Then he spent many days, some months here. He was felt sorry and guilty. Then somehow he died in The Hague. And he is still buried and resting in The Hague. A few years ago, when I came here as the Secretary General, as one of the Korean citizens, I paid my tribute. This is the place where Korea has had long relationship and connection with the Netherlands government and people. In that regard, I really appreciate again for your taking care of many people around the world who really need the support, not only from the United Nations, but from the people of Netherlands. In a sense, Netherlands is one of the tallest nations on earth. You also stand tall among the community of nations. Today, I'd like to talk about this community, the United Nations, which just last year celebrated its 70th anniversary. I'll talk about the past, the present, and the future, the challenges we face, our aspirations for the coming decades, and role you can play, particularly young students. 7 decades ago, across this continent and around the world, cities were filled with rubble, ashes, and fields were saturated with the blood, and families were reeling from their losses. The horrors of the Holocaust and dreadful threat of nuclear weapons were revealed to a shocked world. From the ashes of the Second World War rose the United Nations. It was a necessary gamble at the time to end the scourge of war, reaffirm the equal human rights of men and women, and promote justice, freedom, and social progress for all. With the adoption of the United Nations Charter, a world in ruins found a path to renewal. 7 decades on, the world needs the United Nations as much as ever. We need the United Nations to defend human rights for all, regardless of race, religion, nationality, gender, or sexual orientation. Our relief workers are needed to deliver life-saving aid. And our peacekeepers are needed to help countries turn from conflict to peace. Around the world, we are being tested in old ways and new. The world is changing, rapidly changing, rapidly and dramatically. We are more connected than ever before. More people than ever live in cities. And the human family has a new profile. More than half the Earth's people are now under the age of 25. You belong to that largest generation of that. In a sense, this world is very new, very young. New economic powers are also rising. And new threats have emerged, like climate change above all. Our shared challenge is to shape this new world for the better, to build the landscape of opportunity and peace. Our blueprint for this better future is a 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted last September at the United Nations by world leaders, including your own Prime Minister. Agenda 2030, with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, is our guide for ending poverty and building a safer, healthier, and more secure world for people and the planet Earth. This is a blueprint to put all the people and planet Earth toward a sustainable path. It embodies a commitment to leave no one behind. To leave no one behind. That's the main philosophical theme of Sustainable Development Goals. In many respects, it is a global declaration of interdependence. The Sustainable Development Goals provide a set of integrated priorities for people, planet, prosperity, partnership, and peace. Coincidentally, all these are 5 Ps. 5 Ps. All starts with P. People, planet, prosperity, partnership, and peace. One of the threads running through this rich tapestry is women's empowerment. This has been a priority across my decade as Secretary General of the United Nations. I hope you will all support me in ending violence against women and girls. We must enable all women and girls to fully enjoy their rights and realize their potential. Dear students, we will not achieve sustainable development and make the world better for all if we exclude half the population. This world, half the sky, are women. And we will not be able to reach our goals without acting on climate change. Last December, another sign of a great hope, the world leaders gathered in Paris. More than 150 world leaders came to Paris and agreed to a Paris Agreement on climate change. That was after at least 2 decades of negotiations. The Paris Agreement is not the end. Of course, it's not also a beginning, because we have been coming through all the decade-long negotiations, but it's a very important turning point for global cooperation on one of the humankind's greatest challenges. It is the first ever agreement committing all nations to mitigate their emissions. It marks the beginning of the end of growth built solely on fossil fuel consumption. Markets now have the signals that they need to unleash the full force of human ingenuity for low carbon prosperity. I will count on all of you to be part of this transition to a low carbon future. You are consumers who can demand sustainable products. You are also innovators who can create energy breakthrough. You are voters who can elect leaders who do not deny the problem. I also count on you to help build a world of peace and justice. You are part of the new social media generation. I count on you to use the powerful tool for global harmony. As a Secretary General, I have consistently urged leaders and citizens to avoid the siren songs of those who sow fear, hate, and division. This cannot be a world of us and them. It must be a world of we the people. We must all unite and speak out against the hate-filled rhetoric, whether it comes from leaders, office seekers, ordinary citizens, or the media. In an interconnected world, we need to build bridges, not the walls, not the barriers or barbed wires. I'm particularly concerned about refugees and migrants. This massive global movement of refugees and migrants have been sweeping and affecting particularly European continents. Many have lost everything, including their lives, homes, jobs, loved ones, and they have no choice but to flee to an uncertain future. Many others are seeking better lives because of discrimination or grinding poverty. If I may talk about myself, when I was 6 years old, a Korean War broke out. And my family, my parents, had to flee. And my village was all destroyed. My schools were all destroyed. That was what I experienced during the Korean War. The United Nations brought us at that time food, medicines, even textbooks, and sometimes even toys for children. And they protected us from the troops of many nations, including the Netherlands. Dutch government at that time sent more than 5,300 soldiers at that time, and the Navy destroyer. We are very much grateful. Again, even though I'm not talking about Korea here, I'm standing here as a Secretary General, but I cannot hide that I'm also a Korean. That is why I am very much grateful to many Dutch people who lost their lives and who protected us. At that time, the blue flag of the United Nations, all the soldiers coming from 16 countries, they were carrying blue flags of the United Nations. UN flag was a beacon of hope. They were our saviors. As a Secretary General, I have been traveling many places around the world, meeting refugees and people, a vulnerable group of people who need urgent life-saving support. I told them that as United Nations was with me at that time, 65 years ago, then I am here. United Nations is with you. Don't despair and have a great hope in the United Nations. That has been my message. That flag is still a sign of solidarity for so many millions of children and women and oppressed people caught up in conflict or disaster or suffering from poverty, hunger, and disease. Today, the refugee crisis is showing no signs of lessening. The United Nations is calling for greater solidarity and compassion. This is not the crisis of numbers. Of course, when you have 1 million people, then this is a huge, massive, it's uncontrollable. I don't think it is a crisis of numbers. It's a crisis of solidarity, global solidarity, crisis of compassion. If we show the compassionate leadership with the sense of shared responsibility, I think we can solve this matter. I recently traveled to Jordan and Lebanon together with the president of World Bank, Jim Yong Kim, Dr. Jim Yong Kim. He happened to be a Korean American again, where I met Syrians fleeing from unimaginable horrors. We are now the 6th year of conflict in Syria. The continuing conflict in Syria have generated billions of refugees because these refugees couldn't have any other alternatives but to flee. We have at least 4.8 million refugees. More than 1 million people have come to Lebanon. If you go to Lebanon, this is a small country with the 4 million people. 1 out of 3, if you ask, they are either Syrians or Palestinian refugees. So it has affected not only socio-economic crisis, but it has also changed the fabrics of community. In Jordan, it's a small country, small population. They have more than 650,000 people. That's why I decided, together with the World Bank president, visited and wanted to show some solidarity and with financial support. The world has been confronted with an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. The Syrian conflict has been the scene of the use of chemical weapons, siege, and starvation as a tool of war, unlawful detention, torture, and indiscriminate and criminal shelling and aerial bombardment of civilians. In fact, I'd like to introduce very distinguished Dutch Ms. Kak. Where are you sitting? Yeah, I cannot see you. She was the head of investigation team, independent investigation team to investigate this chemical weapon, use of chemical weapons in Syria. Now, she is my special representative in Lebanon. Again, she's coming from, I think from, what do you call it, from fire to, from frying pan to maybe fire, or fire from to frying pan. Maybe a frying pan now. I hope so, I hope so. Then we really appreciate her great contribution and commitment for peace. Today, in the home of international justice, I say that those responsible for these crimes must be held to account. The conflict in Syria is not just a human rights and humanitarian catastrophe for the Syrian people. It poses a direct threat to regional and global security. Countries are fighting proxy wars, and violent extremists are using it to spread their hate and destruction. The terrorism and violent extremism we are seeing today is a direct assault on human rights. There can never be any justification for such acts. To tackle this challenge, we cannot just rely on force. We need to examine the underlying drivers, the root causes of these extremism and terrorism. That means addressing discrimination, ensuring good governance, and providing access to education, quality education, social services, and employment opportunities. I have launched a plan of action of the United Nations to prevent violent extremism, and it has been warmly welcomed by the United Nations General Assembly. This plan emphasizes that we must also avoid responses that violate human rights and feed the problem we are trying to solve. This means that in the course of countering extremism and terrorism, we should never violate human rights of those people affected. We must also intensify our efforts to reach the most vulnerable members of the society. The Sustainable Development Goals, which I introduced, include a promise to reach those furthest behind first. That includes record numbers of people caught up in conflict and natural disasters around the world. The World Humanitarian Summit that I will convene in Istanbul from 23rd and 24th May is our opportunity to improve our support for these people. We have now 125 million people around the world, including 60 million refugees and migrants. They need our daily life-saving assistance, humanitarian assistance. This is the record number of people who need our support since the end of Second World War. I'm asking world leaders to reaffirm our common humanity, to look at the root causes of these crises. Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, if there is one thing I have learned as a Secretary General, traveling around the world during last 9 years and 4 months, if there is one message that I can leave you today, it is this. We are all members of one single human family, sharing one single planet Earth. We must care for each other and care for our home. We must act as global citizens. In today's globalized world, the walls between the national and international continue to fall away. There is no such border lines. Particularly in European Union, there is no border. There is a Schengen treaty, so you can freely pass through. Likewise, from Europe to Asia or Africa, I think these national borders do not have much meaning these days. The international interest and the national interest are increasingly one and the same. We need to work together towards new heights of international cooperation. Reading the news, the world may seem a scary place. People rightly worry about the next extreme storm, the next terrorist attack, the next financial shock, or next outbreak of deadly diseases like Ebola or Zika. But I continue to believe that as a family of nations, as global citizens, we can meet these challenges when we are united. That means we have to be united. We have to stand against those who would try to divide us. They often speak louder. I think we must speak loudest way to defeat those kind of hatred and division. Let us speak much, much louder and loudest. Wherever I go, I tell young people, young citizens all around the world, please raise your voices. You have legitimate right to raise your voice. Tell your president, prime minister, ministers, mayors, congressmen, tell them that, challenge them, that please make this world better. This is the place where I and my succeeding generations will live. This is what I'm asking you. Young people have exciting new ways to push for a better world and to connect with like-minded peers across the world. Please make good use of that freedom and prerogative. We need you to shout for civil rights, for social justice, for equal opportunity and fair play here in the Netherlands and beyond, all around the world. All members of our human family want basic services, decent jobs, democratic systems, human rights, and peace. When we unite to realize human progress for everyone, I think we can deliver. Today, I ask you to act for our common future, common humanity. I call on you to give back as global citizens. Rise to the challenges of your generation. Join forces with the United Nations to make this world a better for all. I thank you for your engagement and commitment. Let's work together to make this world better for all. I thank you very much. Dank u.
Yes, thank you very much, Secretary General. Please, thank you very much for this call to compassion and also this call to voice. And thank you for sharing these personal memories of you as a 6-year-old boy fleeing your own home. You spoke also about ending the violence against girls and women. You also spoke about refugee children in this humanitarian tragedy. Now, yesterday, Gordon Brown, he was the former Prime Minister of the UK, United Kingdom, and he's now leading the Global Citizenship Commission. Yesterday, he came with an advice, actually to you. He will make that an advice to you. And he's saying, I feel that the rights of children are being a bit ignored. And he's calling now for an international court or tribunal to punish people who violate these rights of children. Do you feel that's a good idea? What do you think of that idea?
I met former Prime Minister of UK, Gordon Brown, yesterday.
Oh. Good, that's why he did that proposal, yeah.
Just before taking my plane. And I met him again on previous day, Sunday morning. We had in-depth discussions how this Global Citizenship Commission, who established with very distinguished members of at least the 2 Nobel Peace Prize laureates and the former president of Ghana. And there are many, about 20 members of very global leaders. There are many ways they are now working. How this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was declared in 1948, can be better and fully implemented in the 21st century. I fully support it. There are many ways, including protecting the children's rights and protecting women and girls from sexual violence and discriminations. For detailed matters, what kind of a tribunal or how we can bring these matters to the violators to the tribunal, I think we need to discuss about this matter. There was one of the permanent members of the Security Council who proposed that in case of the crimes against humanity, then the veto power countries should not refrain from exercising veto power. But that has not been able to get agreement among all the P5s. But this is a good movement, good voice, very strong voice, that citizens, just the normal citizens, are rising to challenge, to make this happen. But as a Secretary General, I fully supported the work of this Global Citizenship Commission led by Gordon Brown.
And in case such a court might be installed, then do you feel The Hague, as capital of justice, would be a good place for such a court?
Of course, this is the place where you have ICJ, ICC, and special court for Lebanon, and ICTY, even though now it has finished their job with all the remaining things now being taken care of by other mechanisms. But I think this is the place where we can fully utilize the existing legal practices and expertise. Therefore, I would support for that idea. Yes.
Let's go and move to the audience, because there's some students who have some questions. They've prepared them. Martin Olsen, where is he? Okay, the first question is for you. Please go ahead.
Mr. Secretary General, many thanks for your truly inspiring words. The UN is an organization founded by nation states. However, non-state actors have increased their significance over the past decade. How do you see a role for NGOs and others to influence the UN and to help your organization to prepare for the issues of this century in which national governments are increasingly influenced by these non-state actors? Thank you very much.
That's a very important question, but this has already become part of this global world. In the past, maybe early 20th century, it has been mostly the governments, executive powers, which have been carrying out all the visions and implementing without much closer coordination. But this 21st century, from the middle of 20th century, and particularly these days, without the full participation and engagement and consultation with the civil society and business community, I think nothing can be done properly. I've been urging, as a Secretary General, to world leaders that in this world, there's a partnership among tripartite partnership among governments, business community, and civil society. This should stand together. Without involving any one of these, for example, without participation of civil society or either the business community, however good and visionary a policy and idea may be, this cannot be fully implemented to the best possible result. And therefore, I'm asking, as civil society members, you just try to raise your voice. You have, again, unlimited voice. President and prime ministers, they have limited terms of office. And they are elected by the people. They are elected by you. So you can always raise your voice and convey your aspirations. And I've been speaking to world leaders. Please listen carefully and attentively to the voices of people, what their aspirations, what their challenges are. Wherever the leaders have neglected to listening to this, you have seen so many problems taking place, political instability.
And do you feel that engaging these non-state actors, do you feel that that would therefore need a redesign of the institution of global governance?
United Nations has been very closely coordinating with the civil society. In fact, there are many NGOs who now come to the United Nations, and they convene their meetings where ambassadors and government officials are participating. So it has become part of almost the global governance. So I'm asking, wherever this may be lacking, they should further expand their good governance by engaging civil societies.
Okay, thank you. We've got a next question by Umeda Fasilova. Where is she? Oh, she's over there.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Pan Ki-moon, for the inspiring speech you gave us today. I'm from Tajikistan, and I study international communication. Well, our generation is a generation that cannot imagine the world without internet, and we have never experienced life without it. So we use it every day, and especially with the exposure of social media. So in your opinion, how can the United Nations use our generation, our social media generation, in order to improve the world and tackle the challenges that you've mentioned? Thank you very much.
We are living in a transformative technology development era. This has changed the whole spectrums of our life, government and business and civil society. There can not be any one-way traffic from the government to the people. Now it's a multifaceted traffics, exchanges of views, particularly through this social media. The invent of internet, I think, has changed the whole our lifestyles and the way we work. Therefore, without the internet, without social media, I think nothing can be done. For example, I introduced about this Sustainable Development Goals. It has 17 goals. Now, how we have selected 17 goals? Why not 18, or why not 16, why 15? When I was mandated by the General Assembly member states to propose ideas for sustainable development goals, what needs to be contained there, United Nations reached out at least 8 million people, including many young youth groups, business, civil society, and youth and women groups, 8 million people asking through this social media, just tell us your ideas. What kind of world do you want? What is your aspiration? What are the problems? What are the problems? What are your aspirations? They immediately responded through social media, internet, whatever means. We compiled and analyzed and categorized, and I proposed to the General Assembly, member states. They've been negotiating for 2 years based on this survey which we conducted. I'm sure that the business communities and government, they are all reaching out to their own people, their customers. Particularly without reaching out the customers through social media, no business can prosper. So we are living in a very transformative era where everybody should be part of this.
Thank you. We have a third student, Rudy van der Beek. Don't know where he is. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for being here. My name is Rudy van der Beek, student Safety Security Management. As a Dutch citizen born and raised in this lovely city, my question is, what could The Hague do to further promote peace and justice instead of keeping its course in tribunals here?
You mean just
So The Hague is now the city, the capital of justice.
Yeah.
What else could The Hague do to promote peace and justice, apart from having the tribunals?
I have already explained extensively about the importance of The Hague as there may be many different names, legal capital of the world, capital of the world for peace and justice. We have so many international organizations, ICJ, ICC, and ICTY, and special tribunal for Lebanon, and a lot of things are going on here. Starting from, in fact, before that, the Permanent Court of Justice, which is the former body of ICJ, then International Peace Conference, etc. So you have established such a good tradition and good name. And you have also, not only the organizations for international peace and justice are located here, your government has reached out to the world by sending peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers to Mali, Middle East, and Cote d'Ivoire, and elsewhere. And you have been practicing lead by example. And you have also great donor country in terms of sustainable development to many poor countries. I think you are one of the top 10 donor countries when it comes to official development assistance. Therefore, I am very much grateful. The main purpose of my coming here, of course, to participate in some important celebration occasions, but to renew and further strengthen our partnership between United Nations and Netherlands, also asking Netherlands to do even much more in the coming years. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You know, we would love to go on and talk more with you about international affairs. Unfortunately, you've got a really tight schedule, we know. So we must say thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please remain seated so that the Secretary General can leave the room first. But again, thank you very much. And
thank you.
Dank u. Thank you very much. And wish you a lovely stay in the Netherlands. Thank you.